According to the CDC, the last tranche of data from the National Crime Victims Brief, 37 million women alone have experienced workplace sexual harassment. And I see workplaces as the next frontier when the courtrooms really provide pretty limited amounts of relief for a very limited amount of people.
It's The Journey with drug and alcohol attorney Mark G. Astor.
Welcome to The Journey with Mark Astor. I'm your host, Mark Astor. I spent a lot of years sitting across the table from people during some of the most challenging moments of their lives as an attorney, an advocate, and as someone who understands that the road isn't always straight. What I've learned is that success, recovery, and growth rarely look the way we expect them to. There are detours, hard conversations, and moments that change everything. On this podcast, I talk with people who are willing to be honest about their journey, what worked, what didn't, and what they wish they knew sooner. I am so excited to introduce this very special guest. This is JoDee Neil. How are you, JoDee?
I'm great. Thank you. What a beautiful intro.
Listen, it's the old trial lawyer in me, but I know that I'm certainly, if not matched, maybe overmatched today. Before we get into it, I want to tell folks a little bit about you. For over 2 decades, JoDee Neil has been a force in the legal world. That is so true. As a prosecutor in the Crimes Against Children Division and a leading attorney in complex civil litigation, she has dedicated her career to fighting for the most vulnerable. Her work has taken her from high-stakes criminal trials in North Texas to fighting for justice in the opioid litigation, the most complex litigation of our lifetime. Raised in a legal family, JoDee started working in her father's criminal law practice at just 13 years old. Then as a prosecutor, she realized her true calling was to fight for children, a mission that has defined her career. Through her work, she has become a leading voice on the need for society to heal from its past and to protect the next generation. A loving mother of 2, JoDee is also a survivor, a truth she only recently shared publicly. She has committed her life to showing others how to find their voice, confront their pain, and reclaim their power. She has a book out, and we're going to talk about that. And in that book, she brings together her professional expertise and personal courage to guide readers on a path to healing and freedom. JoDee, I'm so happy that we met, but you are an incredibly impressive attorney. And I don't even know where to start, but we're going to start at the beginning because it almost sounds like you were born to be a prosecutor. I fell into it, and we talked a bit about that when we started to get to know each other, but amazing, right? You've been a lawyer for how many years now?
Just over 20.
Okay. It's a beautiful thing. I love it. So let's go back a little bit in time because you have this accent thing and I understand how that works, but you are based where? In Texas?
I'm based in Dallas, Texas.
Okay. I guess it doesn't get any more Texas than Dallas.
I'm wearing blue for the occasion.
I love it. Tell me a little bit about your practice now, how you got into it, and then we can talk about what it was like, because I know that we were both prosecutors, although I didn't prosecute some of the amazingly challenging cases you did. So are you practicing law now, or you're just consulting?
I am doing some law practice, a little bit here and there, but I'm not taking on a full high-volume personal injury or criminal defense caseload, like you might think in the traditional sense.
Okay, so tell us about the consulting work that you're doing now, because you've got the book, and I know that this whole mission of yours it's really front and center. And when we get done with this, I want people to know how they can get your book because it's terrific stuff. But let's talk about what you're doing right now.
Thank you. According to the CDC, the last tranche of data from the National Crime Victims Brief, 37 million women alone have experienced workplace sexual harassment. And I see workplaces as the next frontier when the courtrooms really provide pretty limited amounts of relief for a very limited amount of people. So I'm working on workplace humanity solutions where businesses, corporations, CEOs can handle the reality of what we know about the prevalence of workplace harassment and in a compassionate, common sense way. And I'm also here to teach people how to compartmentalize their trauma and not necessarily take it into the workplace. so that everyone can have a healthier workplace environment.
Who's your typical client? How does that work? Who's retaining you? For how long?
I have one client right now. I represent a group of Montessori schools. I have access to a lot of CEOs as a member of Vistage International. And so as I'm building this practice, I'm building out to be someone that a CEO can have referred to them, who the CEO can ask me to come into their workplace, maybe do a listening tour, perhaps an investigation, maybe even a training. I've been contacted to do sexual harassment trainings. It's really a corporate embodiment of what I know so well.
Okay, so what does that look like? Maybe we could talk about that. What does that even mean, sexual harassment in the workplace? Because I think that people probably don't know. And I think what it looks like in 2026 is probably a whole lot different than what it looked like maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago in terms of what constituted sexual harassment. So maybe talk about that just for a minute or two.
According to the EEOC, sexual harassment and retaliation charges are the leading claim in all of the EEOC data set. And retaliation comes after someone has told the truth about what's happened to them in a workplace. And even in Texas, retaliation is really your strongest cause of action in a workplace conflict, even though Texas is not a great place for employees in workplace harassment situations, which is probably why all the corporations are moving here. We have like very archaic caps on pain and suffering damages for workplace harassment cases. I would get the crisis call and say, hey, okay, what's going on here? Do you have a general counsel or not? Is this a small business or a large business? Who do I need to report to? And then I would start working steps. Okay, what happened? And to try and contain the situation so that retaliation doesn't happen, because that's where I see the most harm coming to employees. And a workplace conflict can drive someone to a very dark place.
Is it typically male boss harassing female employee? Is it the other way around? Is it same sex? What are you seeing?
It varies. Obviously, it varies. What the biggest issue is retaliation. Once the person says something, they close ranks, and it gets really lonely and very painful for the person who said something. And look, we want people to say when people are doing bad things in workplaces, because there's so much liability if the employer knew and did nothing. And so we want to make sure that for lack of a better term, the whistleblower knows that they can come forward and say the truth about what happened and not be fired, ostracized, have their work taken away, have their responsibilities taken away. So all of that, and it happens every day. One of the most common complaints I get is on workplace issues, and retaliation is the lead consult request.
Who is the employer going to? Excuse me, the employee going to?
Typically HR or another employee.
And what kinds of things are they complaining about? It could vary, I would imagine. Obviously, from sexual assault to silly comments.
Yeah,
Right.
all of that. All of that. It's in the news all the time too. We live in a country that is rife with perpetrators and perpetrator conduct. 57,748,000 American women survived contact sexual violence in their lifetime. They're saying half. That's according to the CDC, the same data set I referenced earlier. This is not a one-off issue, and perpetrators are taking their same conduct into the workplace. It's a hunting ground for the next prey. When it gets reported it could get reported at the verbal harassment level. It could get reported after something really bad has happened. And all of this creates loss of productivity. Employers don't understand, why are we not hitting our markers? Why are we not showing the performance that we projected? They're very mathy. And what I've seen is a lot of water cooler, just people in turmoil in workplaces, just milling around. Like, he said this to me, and then I didn't know what to do. And I'm afraid if I report it to HR, they're going to take his side because that's his cousin or his buddy from high school. There's all these different aspects that are discussed, and it is a drain on the workplace.
Yeah, and I would imagine there's probably some lawsuits coming out of these too, obviously, right? And obviously, if a big corporation knows about it and does nothing about it, and they've got somebody in management who is a repeat, for lack of a word, offender, that's a problem. They're probably going to get sued for some dollars over that.
Absolutely. It creates a lot of liability. And
So,
the way the workplace handles it creates liability too. When they shame a survivor, when they attack the survivor, the consciousness is changing. We're not there yet, but no one likes that. Juries really don't like it when the survivor gets attacked for doing what's right.
so I know that you were a prosecutor for, I think, how many years were you a prosecutor for?
Almost 6 the first time around, and then the second time, let's just say 6 months.
Okay. And we're going to talk about that too. But how do you go from prosecuting, I guess, sexual predators who are preying on children to the kind of work that you're consulting with now? How'd that happen?
When I was in civil practice, I did a couple of workplace harassment cases and did some consults when I was at a bigger firm. And I learned a lot about that. And then I'm contacted about those quite a bit in private practice. And it's interesting to me because it's it's a huge swath of survivors that work. Women work jobs. The workforce there's a lot of women working jobs. And wherever we are, either we have residual trauma from what we've already survived, and we know from this discussion, the CDC is saying half. We either bring in that, because when you've been a survivor, you are injured. You're in a state of injury. Yes, you can go to work. Yes, you can wake up, feed your kids breakfast, but you're in a constant state of injury. And so then you go to your job where maybe someone just looks at you the wrong way and you feel your radar goes up, danger, and you feel attacked. That can affect your workplace performance. And so really, this is me looking to find the next place where I can help survivors, because I feel way too limited by the criminal and the civil justice system as a lawyer.
Okay. So does that mean what you're talking about, bringing in some kind of modalities of treatment for these folks, the people that are victims?
I could do that. I could be hired by a workplace to come in and do an Outcry Witness presentation. How does what we've lived through affect our workplace performance? Do you feel on edge? Do you feel very sensitive? Do you have to take breaks and go into the bathroom and do your box breathing exercises? Okay, then these are all signs that you might need to get my book and say the truth about what's happened to you finally.
And it's a problem. And I think attitudes over time have changed in terms of how we look at it. But also, obviously, we've had a shift. And my mom, she was 83 now. She was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had businesses. And I think back in the certainly late 60s and 70s, I think women's roles in general were a whole lot different, for good or bad. I'm not here to pass judgment. I'm just saying things have changed now. We have we had a woman vice president, right? And we've had other women that have tried to run for president. Society has changed, but yet we still have this issue where, for a large part, women are preyed on.
Yeah.
So you're
Preyed on and don't say and haven't made an outcry, which means you're really in a traumatized, injured state while you're getting jobs, working every day, getting promoted. It's the pressure cooker. It's a pressure cooker.
Do you think that applies to the legal profession?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. The mafia out there, secrecy, you will get blacklisted. Yeah.
Do you think that happens, say, when you work for the government as prosecutor, or even maybe the public defender's office?
Yes. Yes.
It was interesting when I was a prosecutor. We had a sort of standing office policy that you didn't fraternize with your colleagues. How's that? And I was really afraid of that. And yet there were colleagues of mine, and they didn't seem to mind.
One of my favorite cases that I've done, and I'm real proud of this work, was the versus Collin County case. It was a federal lawsuit on behalf of the chief investigator for the Collin County District Attorney's Office, who had been sexually harassed by the elected. And that was obviously a government workplace. And it wasn't just her, it was 6 plaintiffs. It was a big deal. And it called for accountability not only accountability, but the civil rights mechanisms that allow people to say the truth. Witnesses, their 1985 and 1986 are real and they're valid causes.
These are the federal statutes that are
Correct.
supposed to protect.
Correct. Yeah, you can't lean on people to affect their testimony, especially if you're the government. So it was the 1983, and 1985, and 1986, obviously in a Title VII.
My mind is turning, right? Because as lawyers, we're always thinking, and I'm saying to myself, is there, you hear all this, and I try not to get political with these podcasts, but it's hard on, there's obviously the whole, look, I have 5 nieces, 2 grandnieces, and a stepdaughter. And we're hearing all of this conversation about women's sports and do we protect women's sports? And to me, there seems, if we're going to protect women, sports, the workplace, the whole bit, I think this is an evolving arena. And I mean, depending on which way you lean politically, that that definition that we seems to be open for debate.
Yeah. It shouldn't have anything to do with politics. And in fact, I've established myself as a nonpartisan advocate because throughout my work with juries, the one thing I have found is that everyone cares about kids and everyone says they care about survivors. That is a topic where I find a lot of unity among the members of the public that I have spoken to. And so I believe if I just stay focused on those 2 things, then I don't need to talk about red or blue. It's irrelevant.
Let's go back a little bit in time, because I know that you grew up in North Texas.
Yes.
What was life like growing up in North Texas? Tell me about your family a little bit.
I wrote my first 5-paragraph essay on Rush Limbaugh's book, The Way Things Ought to Be, if that tells you anything.
Okay.
I ended up doing an equal amount of time on the blue side, but it was pretty bananas. I grew up in the Word of Faith Healer Church with Bob Tilton, and I went to a very cult-like conservative Christian school until I graduated high school. And
was it an all-girls school?
No, it was not all girls. I might have been better off if it was, but it was like a Baptist offshoot. My next podcast episode will be about it.
I like that. Okay. My parents sent me to an all-boys private school, and I'm sure they didn't mean it to be, but I found that to be a particularly miserable experience, maybe because I was the smallest kid in the class and got bullied a lot. Okay, so you grew up in, it sounds like a pretty religious, conservative family.
Yeah.
And Dad was a criminal defense lawyer?
Yeah, that was the big twist on the whole thing. It was not uncommon for my dad to get calls in the middle of the night and go take a jail call. In those days, if you wanted to get someone out of jail, you had to go up to the jail. So we spent a lot of time driving up and down 75 from a nearby suburb to the downtown area where my dad's office was. My mom had problems. She had a very severe alcohol use disorder. And in that day and age, there wasn't medication-assisted treatment and very little treatment. And she was committed to a state institution, a state hospital when I was 10. And everything after that is history.
Wow. Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a younger sibling and I have an older brother.
It's interesting because when I was prosecutor back in the 90s, we didn't have a lot of what I call diversionary courts, right? I mean, these days in Florida, we have drug court, mental health court, veterans court, which is great, right? The idea is to catch somebody early enough. It is not a serious crime and they don't have a long history. We want to get them into those courts, get them through treatment so they don't come back. But I'll tell you, the mandate, even today in Florida, in our criminal system, is right there in the rules of procedure, is to punish first, rehabilitate second. Yeah. And I'm willing to bet Texas was probably a bit like that as well.
You're right. And we're going to have a reckoning with that because the fact is no one wants to pay for the resources that are needed to prosecute all of these sex offenders. And so we're going to have to shift our priorities into, I don't like sitting in the courtroom on a 9-year-old child abuse case with 2 kids. Meanwhile, a case is being tried with a guy who had a gram of a rock of meth who's going down for 28 years. That right there is a bad use of state resources, and the priority shift is needed.
What kind of cases did your dad handle?
Dad did criminal defense and family. He did not do sex offender defense. He did do domestic violence, drugs, theft, all the standard run-of-the-mill criminal defense. He did a little federal, mostly state.
Okay, were you able to go into the jails with him to meet with the clients?
Oh, Oh, yeah. Not necessarily into the client meeting room, but sitting in the waiting room, yeah. And then in the courtroom a lot. He took me around the courthouse with him a lot.
Wow. Okay, so did you get to meet all the judges and things of that nature?
Yeah. In fact, the other day, I said, "Hey, I remember you. I remember you when my dad would take me to family courts." There was a poster he had that had all the judges and their extensions. Yeah. And they remember me too.
Okay, so was your dad trying a lot of cases?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
sit in trial with him?
I did. I did. He had me do either like paralegal assistant work or when I was in college, I think I sat second chair. I think they let me sit at counsel table. I
Wow.
wasn't a real lawyer. And in criminal court, you needed to be a lawyer generally to sit at counsel table, but I think they let me.
Okay, so at what point did you say, "Okay, I'm gonna go to law school. I wanna be a lawyer"?
I was 5.
Wow. So you
Yeah.
just knew you were gonna be a lawyer.
Yeah. I just knew it.
Your dad did criminal defense. I'm wondering how you ended up becoming a prosecutor because and looking, I've got friends of mine whose family members, dads especially, were criminal defense lawyers, and they did a quick stint at the state, but bang out a few trials, and then off they went to do criminal defense. So how'd you go from sitting second chair with your dad, criminal defense counsel, to being a prosecutor?
That's a great question. So my dad started out as a prosecutor. He worked for Henry Wade, as in Roe versus Wade, in the 60s.
Wow.
So he was a
Okay.
big believer in the state, and he really appreciated the structure of government paycheck jobs. Criminal defense is pretty feast and famine, and I don't think he wanted that for me, and that was pretty clear. And I had planned to just do the usual tour of the state, but then I fell in love with the work, and I loved representing my people.
So was your first job out of law school with the state?
Yes.
Okay, mine too. I had interned in '93, not to age myself, but and I was bitten by the bug. And I think I told you I was not a particularly good law student. I was in the top half, but that doesn't say much because I think
Yeah.
the top half is not far off from the bottom half. I wasn't a law review student. I had really very little passion for the law. I was like, I avoided classes like tax. I think that for me, that actually the classes that really worked for me were evidence and trial advocacy,
Same.
right? Because that to me, I could understand. Okay, I get it. That rule says I can bring this evidence, but exclude that. Or I get, or I can exclude his evidence and now I can bring mine, that type of thing. And it really resonated with me. But I didn't really, quote, get it, how it all worked until I interned for 6 months and got to try some cases. And then for me, I was 5 minutes into my first direct and I'm like, okay, I'm supposed to be here, which is good because I don't know where else I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I knew it. I said, this is for me is a level playing field. I'll take anybody on. I
Yeah.
felt very comfortable in the courtroom. And I know you and I talked about that.
I was the same way. Law school was a means to an end. I had to do this thing to get the bar card to get into the courtroom. And in those days, the courtroom was not some myth. It was a place where real lawyers went and
Yeah.
fought. Now it seems like a myth. It seems like a myth. If I was in law school today, I would say, oh my God, how am I ever going to get there? It's just so hard to get into the courtroom.
I think at least where I went to law school down here in South Florida, Nova, I mean, they had a criminal clinic. So you become a certified legal intern by taking evidence, trial ad, and criminal procedure. And then you can either intern with the state or the public defender's office. And we had a couple of different counties or even the AG's office, Attorney General's office. But for me, I wanted to go. I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to get the courtroom experience. I want to try cases. Otherwise, what's the point in doing it? I might as well just get through law school and go work in a civil firm. And I didn't want that.
Yeah.
I wanted some real courtroom experience. And I tried moot court, and that did nothing for me. I
Yeah.
also clerked for an appellate court judge and found that, to be candid with you, a little bit on the boring side. I didn't like writing briefs. It was too boring for me. Get me in the trenches. Let's roll.
Yeah.
And I got the impression that
Same.
you were the same way.
Same. I did prosecution clinic when SMU had it. Southern Methodist University is where I went. That's also where my dad went. And now they don't have any of those clinics. They don't have prosecution clinic. I don't even think they have criminal defense clinic. But I was trying cases when I was 24 through the clinic. So I did basically the
Yep.
exact same
Do what I
process.
did. You went and tried cases.
I started singing in church. I have a recording of me singing when I was 4. And so I was pretty comfortable being in front of people. And I just knew I wanted to get in there and joust.
I find that's an interesting comment because I got to tell you, I was so uncomfortable. When I first interned, they just had me if the judge was taking a plea, and the judge would say, okay, state what's the factual basis to support the plea. They'd have me reading the probable cause affidavit so that, so the court could legally accept the plea. And I remember the first time I started reading the probable cause affidavit and I was sweating bullets and I went on to become like this trial machine. And so I overcame my fear. But I think for you, you were like, all right, just give me the file, let's go. And I got to be that way. Eventually, I'd be like, okay, you got a case that needs to be tried, give me the file.
I had to do the same thing you did, even though I had been singing since I was 4 in front of big crowds, even though I'd grown up in it. There's nothing that can take away that fear besides just doing it, pushing through the fear, doing it. It had to be done. And it took me a while. So you're not alone.
I'm glad because I
Yeah.
like to think of myself as a big shot, but at one time I was not a big shot. The other thing I think we shared was how little we got paid.
Yeah.
Right.
It's almost like you're paying them.
When you've got the victim in a violent crime or even the family of a decedent, I don't know. There were some days I go home and say, I can't believe they're actually paying me to do this. Now, the first 2 years out of law school, I was living at home with my parents. So it wasn't like I was making a fortune. But for me, that satisfaction of getting closure for those families and getting them a little justice, I found that to be irreplaceable. And when I left in 99, I think that was, and I always look back and say that was a mistake because they had offered me, when they knew I was fried and I'd been trying cases
Yeah.
pretty much for 5 years straight, and they offered me to go be the chief at a satellite division, and I turned it down. I always look back and they say that was a mistake because I could have taken that job and just been the chief, not tried cases for 2 years, and then I could have left. But it would have given me another 2 years of experience of frankly leading a team. It would have been actually the satellite office where they did all the first appearances. And I wish I had not left so early because when I did defense work, I enjoyed it, but I didn't get and I made up much more money, but I was miserable. I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't get the satisfaction. And I like a challenge as much as the next lawyer, but it didn't resonate. It didn't have that feeling for me.
It is what you describe and what you experienced is the closest I think that a human can come to being like an archangel. It's a sacred, spiritual fulfillment that you're doing with this other person. It is so beautiful. It is so pure. I'm about to cry just thinking because I know exactly what you're talking about. And I've had to get real clear in my private practice that I just started. I'm like, that's what I want. That's the only thing I'm willing to fight for. That's the kind of case I'm going to take is where I can get that experience. I just can't do anything else.
Yeah.
And I want that for everyone who's getting into law because they want to help people. I really just want, God, I wish I could bottle it and sell it.
Yeah. And I didn't really come to that realization really until about 11 years ago. And I always tell people, though, this work that I do now is easily the most satisfying from a professional standpoint, even more than when I was prosecutor. So I went from 99 and then really from 99 to 2016, trying to do other things than practicing law.
Yeah.
And when I had a failed marriage and all this other stuff and went back to school and I ran off to, I did a lot of things to try and avoid coming to terms with the fact that the legal profession is like the mafia. Once you're in, you ain't leaving. So you better find something you like doing. And I talk to a lot of lawyers. I think there's this mistaken belief, right? Then when people hear, oh, you're a lawyer, you must be making tons of money. They say the average lawyer is making between $50,000 and $60,000 a year, which is, I don't know, by the time you pay your taxes and depending on the state you live in, and it doesn't leave you a lot of change, right? You can't send 2 kids to private school and all that other fun stuff. So I tell lawyers when I do a CLA, I'm like, find a bunch of people that you can help and do it to the best of your ability. And guess what? At some point, somebody will pay you to keep doing it. But if you just go to chase the dollar, I promise you'll be miserable. I had all that. I had all the material possessions at least a single guy could want, and I was completely miserable. So the universe came along and took it all away.
Yeah.
So I was broke.
Everything you said is legit. Spot
So
on.
I went from county court to being in a felony trial unit, but you ended up in crimes against children, which in my office was a very specialized unit.
The first month I was there, I cried every night. I just could not understand how a biological father could perpetrate on his biological daughter. And there were realities like that that were beyond the scope of what I had expected to confront when I signed up to be an assistant DA. In those days, we didn't have really hardly any data about the prevalence. We knew that 1 in 6 little girls would be a victim before they turned 18. And at that time, it was 1 in 8 little boys. It's gotten worse for little girls. Now the data is 1 in 4. So I have a theory about how that happened, but we'll save that for another conversation. Anyhow, it seemed like an anomaly, like this is something that happens to someone else. And I really had to, again, push through fear, push through pain, because there's a kid sitting there who needs me. Like you can't fail. There was a lot of holding back tears, crying in my office, shaking my head, just sometimes sitting in the fetal position in the interview room, holding a stuffed animal, because you're just like, I can't believe this is the world where we live. And then, of course, there's the trial work.
So how long were you prosecuting these crimes against children cases? How many years did you do that?
We'll just say, because I kept, even when they moved me to a felony court, I kept my kids. I call them my kids. So let's just say a solid 3.
That had to be exhausting, emotionally grueling to do that kind of work for that many years.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're big cases. They take a week on average to try, sometimes more. And we had a special, a rocket docket. And so these cases, they brought in visiting judges and tried to get every case tried in less than 2 years. And these cases do go to trial because no one wants to admit that they did that to a kid. And a lot of these defendants don't have criminal history. So they figure, let's just roll the dice and see if you can get me a not guilty. It was a bustling trial docket. Bustling. I was in trial constantly.
Yeah, which I used to tell my colleagues, for every hour that you're in the courtroom, there's probably 4 or 5 hours of prep time.
Yeah.
And if you're in trial during the day, when you get home at night, you not only would need to make sure that you get enough information, because at some point you're gonna have to do a closing and you can't remember what you did 5 days ago. So you got to get all that stuff together right that night. Okay, what did I, and start writing the closing as it's going. And then also I have a hearing. I'm in trial tomorrow, so I better make sure I have all my notes and just go over everything and make sure the witnesses are showing up. It's exhausting during trial work.
It really is. It's multidimensional. Like I don't want to say fracture, but you're like Kali with all these different arms. Yeah, like you said, you're thinking, you're dreaming of your closing argument. You wake up in the night, you write a note. You've got a different notepad over here for cross-examination questions. You don't even know if you're going to be using, because you don't know who's going to be testifying, let alone the defendant.
Right.
So you got to be nimble. You got to be quick on your feet. You just have to completely open your soul and become a vessel.
Yeah, you know what I used to do? Sometimes the night before a closing, I'd go to the gym and I'd exercise. And it sounds weird, but I used to find as I was exercising, all this stuff would come to me. And I just make notes. So I was like, I need to clean my mind, just clear it, and then let everything go. And then I'm like, okay, I got it. Or there were times where I had to have co-counsel, and he'd been taking notes as we go, and I'd say, okay, what do you want me to say in the closing? And I'd let him help me to write it. He'd be like, I'll write it, you just say it. So we would write it together. He'd been sitting there as an observer, so it was easy if he'd been making these points as we went. He was writing it down, and then we'd sit down and be like, okay, what does the closing look like? What's our theory of the case here? You know, right? And this is when I was doing defense work, but where are the weaknesses in the case? Because there's always some holes in the case, right? If it was a perfect case for either the defense or the state, it's getting pled. So what prompted you to leave? At some point you got done and you left.
It was a change in administration. It was political. I didn't want to work for the new guy, who actually ended up being the guy that we sued in the Pickrell case. My instincts are always right. Anyways, I don't want to get too deep into that, but yeah, no, it was the same elected DA. And it was just time. My now ex-husband was working over in Singapore. It was like a Gilligan's Island deal. Come on over for 6 months for your 3-hour tour. And it ended up being almost 6 years. So that's why I left. I think I would have kept on doing it if they had made me a chief. And that's what I had, a notebook. I kept pretty good records. All these journals, all these moleskins, I've got them all upstairs. It's like a big stack. And I said, if they promote me or make me a chief of CAC, then I'll stay and I won't go to Singapore. But if they move me laterally or demote me, then I'm out of here. And that was my conversation with God to say, let me know what you want me to do. Sure enough, they assigned me to the appellate division, and that was all she wrote.
Yeah, you can't take a trial lawyer and put us in an appellate division. That's where we go to die, literally.
It's a slap in the face.
Yeah. They knew that if they did that, you'd leave. So I know there was a period of time where you went back for a short spell and then left again. Tell me about that.
They called me. They recruited me. They heard I'd left the civil law firm where I was doing the opioid litigation. And they said, hey, there's never been a crimes against children division up here in this county. Want to be the chief of it? Want to save the kids? Basically verbatim, all of that. And I was trying to get out of law. I was like you. I had interviewed with the private bank with JP Morgan, and I was like, I got to get out of here because I was not too impressed with my experience in the civil sector either. And I'd already hired my collaborator for my book, and I was like, this is the universe telling me my work is with children. So I took the call and I accepted the role. And I was like, great, I can build something super important that I know works. And I got up there and it was not the place for me. And as much as I hated to do it, I left.
So how long was you there the second time?
About 4 months.
That
Broke my heart. Broke my heart.
Says all we need to know.
You can't just spring a new division on a county, right? You have to have funding. You have to have preparation. I can put myself out there.
You need support stuff. You need a whole team.
Yeah. You need to make good on your promises and provide the investigator, provide the secretary. I believe in myself. I know what I'm capable of. You really know, you figure out who you are when you're trying cases.
Yeah.
But I had to learn one person cannot change a system. And especially a system with an administrative branch, a judicial branch. For me to pull off what they offered me would have required the judiciary up there, their support, the county commissioners, their support, plus obviously the DA's support, which I did not have. What am I supposed to do? Like literally, I'm like throwing my glasses down in the courtroom. I'm like, I will not be a tool of systemic oppression of children, because that's what it is when a case has been pending for 9 years on the defendant's motions to continue. 2 little girls can't do their EMDR to heal because they've got a pending case. 9 years. Explain to me how that's okay. And I was like, I'll end up being a fall guy. I'll do more harm than good in this situation. Forget it. I'm out.
So talk to me about the opioid litigation. How'd that come about? What were you doing? Who were you suing?
Yeah, that was so fun. So in plaintiff, when we moved back from Singapore, I started out at a car wreck firm and then had an opportunity to shift over to an asbestos.
Say car wreck firm. Do you mean a PI firm?
Yeah.
I never want call the car wreck firm. I love that. I'm keeping that. I'm sorry.
It is what it is, right? It's a high volume car wrecks. And here in Texas, there's billboards everywhere, which I really want a billboard so bad. I just don't want to do car wrecks. Anyhow, I went over and they were doing mesothelioma, and I'm like, I've heard of that. And so they hire me because I've got trial experience. And I'm like, this is dust. Not only is it dust, but it's like a super old litigation that kind of peaked in the 90s. And I was like, yeah. So I got on the first degree wheel, the felony courts, so I could do murders and stuff. And right when I was about to put in my notice, the founding partner did a presentation about what we knew at the time about the opioid litigation. And of course, my mom had died of an overdose in 2010. And so I'm sitting there watching that presentation and I'm like, oh, it wasn't all her fault. I remember these big bottles of pills. I remember the pushing. And I was like, oh man. And I just had so much forgiveness in that moment. And I went and I said, I want to do that. And so they assigned me to that division, which was just me and one other lawyer the entire time, basically.
How long did you do that work for?
Almost 6 years. Yeah.
So that had to be challenging work.
Oh my
Reams
God.
and thousands of pages of
Millions. So we ended up, Dallas became the bellwether. And the only case that had gone before Dallas, just barely, was Polster's Cuyahoga County case. And we had Janssen, Allergan, and I really focused on the big 3 distributors, AmerisourceBergen, Cardinal, and McKesson. We're very aggressive plaintiffs, MDL, and we're like give it to us and we'll figure it out. And sure enough, we had this Texas MDL here, and the judge said, all right, yep, we're going to trial. Thankfully, the case had been removed from the federal MDL by a stay.
To
And
define the MDL for the people that are watching this, what does that mean?
multi-district litigation. All the
Okay.
cases are bunched up together. And we represented 46 counties in Texas at the firm I was at, Simon Greenstone. So we were the obvious choice for a bellwether, and the client, Dallas County, was willing to participate. And so off to the races we went. And the first thing that happened that you'll find interesting was all the defendants' documents that they produced at the federal MDL in Cuyahoga County were loaded into a CS Disco database. And it was raining. Like, my dad was in the hospital from heart failure, and he ended up passing away. And I'm in the hospital looking at the database, and it's going from 1 million documents, 5 million documents, 15 million, all the way up to, I forgot, it was 150 million.
So how do you repair a case like that? How do you even sit down and get ready for a depo?
Oh man, it was like the Matrix. It was like breaking the Matrix. So the defendant said, you can't prove that any one person was hurt by any of our drugs in that it cost the county money. They basically dared us. And I was the case manager for the Dallas County case. And I'm like, don't tell me what I can prove.
Well,
The best part about that case, whatever, the defendant said horrible things in emails. But the best part was getting all of the county's records. And so it took us almost 2 years to scan in all of the historical autopsies where we could search for Norco, Lucenta, all these brand name drugs. And we were able to identify decedents. Like tapentadol was a Johnson product that was patented. It's also a specific toxicology in the Dallas County Medical Examiner and their standard operating procedure. So we found like 10 people who died from tapentadol overdose. And it was like, hey, Jansen, this one's on you. And with the shipment records, with the distributors, they're like, oh, you can't prove we shipped any of those drugs. I said, watch me. And we had a ton of experts. We had 24 experts, and we used different data sets like IQVIA for the doctor's prescription records. And then there was ARCOS, which is the DEA database. And all of these different databases, these were not even in the DISCO. These were like databases that were so big, we had to have experts run queries. And we were able to say, actually, we have a 3-day look back, and the pill that this person overdosed was actually distributed by you because that was your pharmacy contract. And that's when the cases started settling.
I love that. I love that. JoDee, with the time we got left, I want to talk about your book. Tell us about that. What's it called? What's it about? What inspired it?
My book is called Outcry Witness. It is a former prosecutor's guide to healing and justice after sexual violence. Outcry Witness is a term of art in criminal practice in Texas. An outcry witness is the first adult that a child chooses to tell the truth about what's happened to them. So typically what happens, child will tell another child who then tells their parent. So who then tells a teacher, whoever that first adult is, who gets that first piece of disclosure from the child is the outcry witness. And even though that's a statement made out of court for the truth of the matter asserted, it is permitted to come into court through this outcry witness to show consistency, yada. It has a purpose, and it's written into the code, and it's a formal designation that almost no one knows about. But I just always felt so grateful to those people because they always came to court and stood up for the kid. And in my experience, it's a moment of holiness when someone chooses to tell you the truth about what's happened to them. And I've been outcry witness for many people. And so I'm broadening it, that an outcry witness is the first person you tell.
I can tell that was a real passion for you. So what inspired that? Was it all those victims you'd helped when you were a prosecutor?
And also, I'm a survivor. Growing up in a house with a trial lawyer and a substance using parent, you don't have healthy coping mechanisms. And I got myself into some pickles. And so there were some bad guys who took advantage of me. And so I had never told. I knew that this was a problem in my life, but I really kept just compartmentalizing it. And it finally became clear to me that if I don't say what happened to me to somebody, I am not going to live my purpose here. And so I did it. And it turned out, in a quasi metaphorical sense, my publisher was my outcry witness. I just knew I had to say it to someone. And then they believed me. And that started the process of writing the book.
I think you're an incredibly brave woman, I'll tell you that. To be able to prosecute those cases knowing what had happened to you is not easy, because I would imagine that every one of those cases you relived your own trauma, and yet you were like, I'm going to take my trauma, I'm going to put it over here because there's a kid over here that needs me.
Yeah.
Not easy. And then you went back at us for a second crack. So it's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
It really shows the humanity is capable of such incredible things, if only we give ourselves a chance. And that was really a testimony to how the human mind can meet demand and survive.
All right, I'm going to ask you one thing before I let you go. Have you been following this Savannah Guthrie case?
A little bit.
What? Okay, I told my wife I had a theory on the case, but I want to hear you, as an ex-prosecutor, what you think.
I have
Do you
no
have any
theory. I have no theory because I'm really focused on things I just found out about the Boy Scouts litigation in bankruptcy. None of them got to tell the truth about what happened to them. And then, of course, the Epstein files. So tell me what's going on here.
Here was my theory. So many years ago, when I was prosecutor, one of the judges, when I was an intern and I went back full time as a county court prosecutor, I won't name her, but her mother-in-law was murdered, and her husband was a prominent civil litigator in the county, and she lived on the island in Palm Beach, which is a very somewhat exclusive area, and she was murdered. And when they went in there, they found a half a palm print in the shower, and what they opined was that she had been murdered. It appeared she'd been dragged into the shower where she had been beaten to the point where they killed her. And then what they did was they tried to clean up the scene in the shower area, but they missed one little piece, and it was a half a palm print. Okay. It was a half a palm print, and it was just enough for them to get an ID on it. Okay. And it turned out to be the pest control guy. And they also what they did was because here in Florida, if you go now these days, if you pawn things, you have to give a thumbprint. There's a database. They were able to track and see that he had pawned some of her jewelry, and those two things, and they nailed him. And I said to my wife, it's the pest control guy. And she said, why do you think that? I think, first of all, this was somebody that knew her, right? And they targeted her, maybe not because of who her daughter was, but they knew her. The only other thought I was, maybe Savannah Guthrie did a piece on somebody on the drug cartels, and this is retribution. In which case you don't send a ransom note. Look, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I said to my wife, I said, this is somebody that knew her. They just targeted her. And I don't even know if these ransom notes that they're sending have anything to do with her disappearance. Who the hell knows? That was my thought. And it just seemed like somebody that knew her. They just targeted her. She was just an old lady living on her own. She was easy pickings. She wasn't going to put up much of a fight. She was 80 years old. How much of a trouble could she really put up against one or two individuals? So we'll have to wait and see. For the folks that are watching this, who have a family member who's got a long-standing behavioral health issue, drugs, mental illness, treatment that doesn't work, they're probably med non-compliant, and you want to find out about what options may or may not be available to you, either legal or non-legal, then reach out to us. Our main website is mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com. That's mentalhealthaddictionlawfirm.com, or just Google me. In addition to the podcast, I've got about 750 odd videos on YouTube, so you can get the information you need for free.